Waiting for it to. All right, I'll ask everyone, please mute your mics. We are live on Facebook.
All right, come and help me.
And welcome everybody. This is Chuck Ogg here for the Rock County Progressives. And as most of you know, but for those who don't, the Rock County Progressives, our mission is to promote education and activism here in Rock County. And we are a nonpartisan organization. We do not endorse candidates. However, we do have an occasional candidate to come speak to us. We feel that our position it makes us unique in our ability to have meet the candidates forums like this. And sometimes we have politicians come and speak to us because, well, they're often knowledgeable on topics. And we also see an education for them because, well, you know, they get to learn what our concerns are. And we hope that you will, when, you know, we come to the question and answer portion of this evening, you know, raise your concerns. What are the issues that you care about? And what would you like to be heard on? And gee, at this point, I usually pass the magic hat around, but can't do that here on Zoom. Maybe someday we'll have a Patreon or whatever to raise money if we have to keep meeting here. But we do hope to go back to meeting live at some point over in the community room like we have done for some years. And let's see. One other thing I wanted to mention was that we are thinking about having a picnic coming up in August. We have reserved the second Wednesday. We've reserved the pavilion. And now we're just mulling it over. You know, can we do a social distancing picnic safely? You know, purely potluck. We'll see. But if you have any feedback you'd like to give us on the subject, feel free to let us know. And okay, got a few more people to admit here. And all right, people are trying to rejoin. Okay, now next I'm going to introduce our speaker. You can see him there. He is Joshua Pade. Hey, Josh. Give a brief introduction. Josh was born and raised in Kenosha. His grandparents' family settled in Racine in the 1830s, and his grandmothers were part of the Italian-American immigrant community. Josh lost both his parents growing up and becoming a businessman to support his family. He went to UW-Eau Claire and then interned in DC for the Wisconsin Senator Russ Feingold. He worked his way through law school during the Great Recession, as well as working to help keep families in their homes. He spent a year in the private sector in global operational risk and management, global operational risk and crisis management, working in natural disasters, terrorist threats, cyber threats, active shooters, and pandemics, which I think might be valuable for what we're facing now, but he's also stood in protest against Paul Ryan's efforts to end healthcare coverage. And this is where I usually say, give a big hand to our speaker. Hey, Josh.
Hello, everyone. It is really good to be here. I cannot wait until we can have a meeting persons again. But yes, I'm Josh Pade. I am running for Congress here in the 1st Congressional District. And particularly when I speak to progressive groups, there's a favorite quote of mine I always like to bring up. And it's from Fighting Bob LaFollette. And it says that the essence of the progressive movement, as I see it, lies in its purpose to uphold the fundamental principles of representative government, expresses the hopes and desires of millions of common men and women willing to fight for their ideals and take defeat if necessary, still go on fighting. And through ups and downs, everything that we have come through, we continue the fight for the higher purpose, for the communities that we all live in, for those men and women who are on the front lines, for the people who just found out that their jobs are gone, for the people that want clean air and clean water. We will continue to set big goals and fight for it. And it's why I'm honored to be speaking with all of you and the work that you've been doing, standing shoulder to shoulder, going out. There's so much that needs to be fixed in our country. We have this current crisis that is on top of all the other crises that are going on. Someone asked me today, what would be the first thing you'd like to see happen when we have a new president, a new Congress? And I said, well, we still have kids in cages, and let's not forget that. And we need to stop that. And keeping all of these things on our radar and keeping the fight for what we are doing is important. It's why I'm in this race. Like was mentioned in the introduction, I was born and raised in Kenosha. I grew up in a lower middle class neighborhood, which is, has actually gone down since I've lived there, by Lincoln Park in Kenosha. And my grandparents were part of the labor movement here in Kenosha. My grandpa was an early union organizer when it wasn't safe to organize a union. And I was taught a lot about how we built the middle class in the 20th century, how we came out of the Depression stronger than we entered it, and what the values and the purpose and the meaning of the fight was that they were in. Well, for me, that really became real. When my father died, we were poor. We lost our health insurance. We got put on junk insurance plan. We survived on Social Security and my grandparents. And when Social Security dried up, that's when I had to go to work. And I remember the day that we got the letter. It came in, and my mom always went through the bills at the kitchen table, and I was often with her because I was the oldest of our siblings and had to help with those responsibilities. And we saw this letter from Social Security. My little sister was about to turn 16, and that's when they cut off death benefits. And my mom was a single mom, and she was trying to go back to school, and she was trying to work. She had an entry-level job at Marshfield Clinic, and we just couldn't afford it. And we had to figure out what to do. And for me, that meant going to work. And I got in my truck. I drove to Onalaska, Wisconsin, and I asked Dave Scogan for a job. He was the running Festival Foods at the time, and they were just starting to expand. And I moved around the state helping them expand, open stores. I was 19 years old. I had about 100 people working for me. I learned what servant leadership was. I learned what community was. I was there for so many folks. When you bag their groceries, you learn a lot about people's lives. So football games and soccer games and graduations and understanding people's anxieties and their fears and their dreams, and sending my paychecks home to support my mom. And I was proud that before she passed away, my mom died of lung cancer. I saw her graduate from college and made a promise to her that if I could get back to school, if I could go to law school, I would fight for families like mine. And that's exactly what I did. After I graduated, after I settled her estate, I volunteered. I worked with the Red Cross on the Katrina unit. This was mid 2000s, and took the LSAT, worked my way through law school, started working on either campaigns or public services initiatives. And really for me, the focus became on policy. We need effective policies with the goal of achieving what we want to achieve. And I became a bit of a policy nerd, a policy wonk, and went to law school. And I remember I started going into tax law in law school, and the financial crisis hit. And I took a class called The Catastrophe. It was the class was made up specifically as the crisis was going on, and I was there at the Boston Federal Reserve, watching what was happening to our economy. And my grandmother was still alive at the time, and just seeing what was happening here in Kenosha, seeing Janesville, seeing our communities not really recovering from this recession really struck home for me. I have family members who struggle with opioid addiction. I have friends, neighbors, people that just, after years and years of seeing deindustrialization, this was just a hard blow. And they wanted hope, they wanted something different, and they got dragged down by cynical politics. I went back to Capitol Hill after law school and was working on keeping people in their homes. I was volunteering with services to help people apply for aid for their homes. and was frustrated because we weren't being effective at actually bringing change. And at this point, the Tea Party had taken over in Congress, and I wanted to do something more. So I took a break. I worked in the private sector and figured out how I could be helping campaigns. But after Donald Trump won, I knew I couldn't just stay on the sidelines. I had to do this as hard as I could. So I started working, I started organizing, started getting involved, and really pushing what became a big theme here in 2018 in Wisconsin. And I think a really turning of the tide for Wisconsin is saying that as Democrats, if we want to win, it cannot just be on the basis that the Republicans are bad. We can call out the Republicans, and I will call out the Republicans, particularly Congressman Style. But we also need to present a vision for what we stand for, who we're going to fight for, and how we're going to do it. We're not going to do it by embracing DC corporate lobbyist politics and the kind of revolving door, watered down policies that help those who paid for those policies. We need real change. And now that we're facing this crisis that is severe and different than what we faced during the Great Recession 10 years ago, we need to come out of this stronger, or the cynicism will only grow. We have to fix not just the things that Donald Trump has done as president, but we need to fix why he became president in the first place. And that means being very specific. When I first launched, one of the big focuses I had is tackling geographic inequality. When we look at the way we address economic policy and economic investment, too often the incentives are hyper-local and mostly end up just being a corporate subsidy through the tax code or a real estate subsidy in areas. And what we need to do is think broader. Think about our mid-sized cities, Kenosha, Racine, Janesville, Beloit. How do we incorporate an ecosystem that causes those communities to thrive, that keeps young people in the middle class and brings more people back into the middle class? How do we take advantage of being between three larger cities of Madison, Milwaukee, and Chicago? And we can do that. And it means investing in the right kind of infrastructure. It means making certain that anyone can get the kind of job training or higher education that they need, and not bound, not just by the kind of fees, but by the opportunity cost of not being able to take work to study, like being able to do all the things that they need to do to get there. And the next big piece of that is healthcare, and healthcare has become front and center during this pandemic. I'm proud that I'm the only candidate in this race that stands for universal healthcare for every American. And what I tell people, and what's become a theme of this campaign, is that the only affordable healthcare is universal healthcare. Not just because it's a moral right, but because just pure actuarial insurance mechanics, if you have everyone covered, the affordability of the insurance is higher. The only other way to get affordable health insurance is to take sick people and our senior citizens off of it, and that's not an option as an insurance mandate. And this is actually as a conservative argument. We need everybody there. So what I've talked about are three priorities that will be for me. One, ensuring that the federal government has a simple guarantee of healthcare for everybody. We take the burden and the balkanization away from states who struggle with how they cover people that don't have health insurance. And it makes our states a little more recession proof because Medicaid is such a volatile cost for states. And it means that we wouldn't have to rely on Robin Voss to determine what healthcare is like here in Wisconsin. If we cover everyone guaranteed from the federal government and then focus on having a simplified back-end billing system, reducing red tape, giving people choices, it'll make the cost for hospitals go down and provide more coverage. And it means that our overall spend on healthcare will actually go down, middle-class families will be relieved, and everyone will have healthcare. And that's a top priority for me. The two other things we need to do with healthcare are invest proactively in people's health, in people's nutrition. So a few of you had a chance to meet my wife. She is a expert in early life nutrition. It's something that she has done globally. And we need, as a society, to begin investing in maternal infant health, and prenatal and postnatal health, in nutrition for kids at home and kids in school. We have a big challenge right now with schools being canceled. Too many kids rely on student lunches and student breakfasts. And we need to be thinking proactively about how we're ensuring that every kid is healthy, because every dollar that we invest and a person early in their life saves our society $7 to $12 over the course of that person's lifetime. And that means economic growth. It means that person has a better life. It means they're less likely to get into the criminal justice system, which also needs to be reformed. And it means that we're living up to our ideals and becoming a freer nation. And that, when I think about the big things that we need to be doing, as I mentioned, my mom passed away. My mom died of lung cancer. She was not a smoker. And I remember from the window of my bedroom that I could see the smoke coming from the Pleasant Prairie coal power plant. And it's something that lives with me today. And it's why I am focused and dedicated to ensure that every American has clean water, clean, clean air, and that we really tackle the existential threat of climate change in a way that will bring new jobs, high-paying jobs here to southeastern Wisconsin, make us an innovator again on infrastructure and energy in the world, because we are ceding it to China every single year. They are investing more and more in newer forms of transportation, in newer forms of energy generation and energy transmission, and newer ways of reducing carbon footprint. And we need to be leaders again, be innovators again. It's something that what made us such a great, powerful country economically and from a national security standpoint. And we need to do that again because we are ceding so much of the world to people that don't have best interests in mind. That's something I hope to do as a member of Congress and to be on the forefront of. Finally, the other thing that 2020 has exposed and has once finally in my lifetime built a consensus around is addressing racial inequality and realizing that we must stand that Black lives do matter and that all lives won't matter until Black lives matter in this country. And we have come through so many bloody fights over the course of this country's history. It's Civil War, the Civil Rights Movement. And now this is our moment. This is our moment for our generation, multi-generations, whether you're a boomer or you're I consider myself an X-lennial, so I'm a little bit of Generation X, a little bit of millennials born in 1980, or the up and coming generation. We can fulfill a promise that our founding principles were made by. And that means that it's going to be uncomfortable conversations, but we can demilitarize the police. We can provide the right sorts of resources so that every call or any social service need isn't done with the pathway towards escalation of violence, and making certain that, like other countries, we constantly train people in law enforcement on de-escalation. That's just the tip of the iceberg. We need to address the economic, political disparities of African-American communities. That goes to having a new Voting Rights Act. It means ending gerrymandering. It means bringing, encouraging, and empowering people of color from all walks of life to have a voice in their society. In my campaign, we've been bringing in folks from all different walks of life, people of color, men and women, and that is a voice that I want. I'm fully aware that as a white man running for office, despite all of the challenges I had to get here, I'm still a man of privilege because of my race and my gender. And I need to use that privilege to become a voice for those who don't have that platform. And I intend to do that as a candidate, and I intend to do that if elected to Congress. I intend that if I am elected, that my staff will look as diverse as our district is. And that's what I intend to do. We need to take on Brian Stile. Brian Stile has voted up and down the line with President Trump, and he's voted against helping this crisis. He has gone and joined the coalition of the ignorant in allowing Trump's corruption to go on and ignoring COVID and ignoring climate change, in allowing a Republican-led effort to take healthcare away from millions of Americans. And we are going to call him out on that. We are calling him out on that. And we need to present a real choice to the folks here in this district. Our district is 39% independent. People vote for the people that are standing up for them, and Brian Stile is not standing up for them. And we are in a primary election. I believe I am the best candidate to bring that message to the people here in the 1st Congressional District, to provide the clear contrast to the sort of DC insider politics that Brian Stile represents, and to present a vision that people want to organize for, to get behind. That is what I continue to do. that is what I will do. It is a mission of mine, and it's something that will truly unite us here. And I think we can actually achieve change in the next couple of years if we stick with that. Finally, I'll leave you with this anecdote. I interned with Russ, and when I first went into his office, I got to see his Profile and Courage Award that he received for his work in campaign finance reform. And it looks like the lantern of a ship. And I think of it as, it's a Kennedy thing, so everything's very nautical, but of a lighthouse or a beacon of our democracy. And that's all of us. That's me as a candidate. That's all of you as progressives, as organizers, as people in your community. We are those lights. And if we have the courage to stand up for what we believe for, if we have the courage to talk about the policies and how they impact families every single day, that light will burn brighter. That light will bring us the change that we need, which does include campaign finance reform and ending Citizens United. And that light is what will make the next generation better off with a better country than the one that we found it. And that is my commitment, and that is the fight I'm in. And I am open to any of your questions. I see a couple have come in through the chat. Do you want me to address those first?
Well, here, let me help you out here a bit. At this point, in the past, we've been taking questions mostly from chat, well, exclusively from chat. I'm happy to let people speak if they want to, although I ask people to keep their mics muted. And the tricky thing is how do I call on people exactly? You can actually raise your hand on Zoom if you want to indicate you want to speak. But what I will do is read your text, your messages. And we already had one message, for example. Somebody asked, what is their position on guns?
Yeah, let me address that. When you had mentioned in the introduction, I worked in crisis management. I remember being on the phone with folks. I worked for a mall retailer, and we had our associates and customers hiding in the back room because there was an active shooter situation. And even today, my nephews at school had to go through active shooter training. That's unacceptable. That is not the country that I was raised in. That's not the country I want my nephews or hopefully my kids and grandkids to grow up in. And we have the solution. We know how to fix it. We know how to fix it within the parameters of the Scalia-Heller decision on guns. So taking a conservative viewpoint of the Second Amendment, we can have universal background checks. We can ensure that we have red flag laws to make sure that people who are at risk of shooting themselves or shooting other people, people at risk of domestic violence, that doesn't become an armed conflict. And we can do things like take the weapons and the ammunition, like bump stocks designed for the battlefield, are not used on the streets. That's just a basic approach that, gosh, I saw a poll that said 70% of gun owners, NRA card-carrying gun owners, agree with those things. This is about kowtowing to the gun lobby, and we have to stand up for it. We need to elect as many people in Congress that can stand up for it. Growing up here in Wisconsin, gun safety, hunting, sportsmanship is such a way of life. And what I tell folks, and I think this is a powerful argument, is that by not having proper gun safety regulation, we hurt the right of the proper responsible gun owners, because they get lumped in with people that are doing it illegally. And we need to have common sense gun safety, and I'm for that.
Okay, we have Janet asking, what can we do to reduce the power of police unions?
So addressing all of police reform, the police unions have become powerful. I've talked specifically to police officers who are frustrated with their own union because they want to see reforms passed. And this means our approach to having police reform, a poll just came out today, and I don't remember what it was, but people understand that we don't want to get rid of having policing. People that are saying defund the police, they mean that how are we spending our public dollars? And when you look at the percentage for municipal budgets, if we were investing more in folks, in people, social services, and healthcare, then we wouldn't have the need. And the fact that so many of our police forces through the 1980s era 1033 provision get military equipment only escalates it. If we look over the last few decades, we've silently converted too many of our police forces into a posse comitatus, to use a little Latin, but it's basically a domestic military force. And that's not what their mission is. That's not what they should be doing. And there are examples of areas that have reformed and it worked. And we think we should use that as a baseline. From a federal level, what we need to be doing is, one, incentivizing the demilitarization of police. Two, putting resources into de-escalation training. Three, have national standards on things like chokehold bans, on no-knock warrants, so that we don't have more situations like the one that killed Breonna Taylor in Louisville. These is just the tip of the iceberg of the kind of reform. And now that we have this moment where so many people have a consensus that we need to do it, let's move on it and let's bring people together and have the courage to do it.
If I could ask a related question. So you would be in favor of shifting significant funds away from the police to perhaps reinforce those people who work to solve the problems before the police are called in, like mental health workers, social workers, that kind of thing. Would you support that kind of thing?
We need to absolutely be prioritizing our funds towards investing. And like I mentioned earlier, for every dollar that we're investing in mental health, in social services and health services, the savings will come. The need will take, it's like a cost, it's a demand and supply thing. We're taking away the demand, and that'll naturally lead us to a situation where people aren't as worried because we have improved our communities. And I think one other point, speaking of communities, that I've talked to a lot of folks in the last few weeks, in Minneapolis, 94% of the police officers don't live in Minneapolis. I think it's important that we have police officers that look like their community and live in or near their community. I think that's very important. Community policing is an important step to making sure there's familiarity between the people that are patrolling the streets and the people that are being patrolled and their communities involved. I talked to a police chief actually a couple months ago before all this happened, and I was telling him, I said, the level of fear and intimidation that you say exists between you and the citizens, the responsibility to fix that is on the person with the gun. And he acknowledged that, and we had a conversation, a very productive conversation on community policing and de-escalation. I'm looking at the chat, I got it right here. So someone said about police in schools.
Yeah.
There were no police when I was in school. There shouldn't be police in schools. We need safe schools. That kind of goes back to the gun conversation. We don't need police in schools.
Okay, John has his hand up. You want to ask a question yourself, John?
Yeah, sure. Are you ready for me?
I'm ready.
All right. Well, hey, Josh, I appreciate you doing this, man. Be nice to get somebody in that seat that isn't a total scumbag, because that's all we've had for, seems like, decades here. I'm in Janesville, and I guess my question for you is, what's your view on like the national debt and the federal deficit and just deficit spending and that kind of thing in general?
That is a good question. It is a question that, as someone who has worked on the Hill, the level of hypocrisy of Republicans on the national debt is astounding. And Paul Ryan spent his entire career complaining about the national debt, and as soon as he became Speaker of the House, he pushed through one of the largest deficits in the history of this country. We need to have a realistic view of the debt and what it is. Because I mean, we've always had debt. Debt is a function of our economy. It is an investment piece for everyone from big investors to pensions. And it presents a level of liquidity that allows the United States to compete globally. Now, there are bad debts. Structural deficits that can be subject to interest rate fluctuations are something we need to look out for. Ensuring that we are using our debt in the right way. And by the right way, I mean making the kinds of investments that will grow our economy, that will expand the middle class, and not just using it as a tool of corporate welfare, which is what Congressman Ryan did. If we use debt to say, reform our national infrastructure, whether it's the grid or it's our roads or it's high-speed rail or it's improving our airports, that will improve our economic outlook so much more that it pays for itself. And what I like to compare it to is, and I try to avoid using household comparisons with the national debt because the government, the debt is not a household. But if you think about if you have a house and you get a second mortgage, and you get a second mortgage to improve the value of your home, then that is good debt. And if I think about the national debt and how we're making our investments, if it's to get us through a recession in a stronger place than we were before the recession, if it's to build the infrastructure of our economy, then that's good debt. We do need to think about future obligations, with the growing retirement of folks that are going to be taking Medicare and Social Security. And a lot of the fixes, fixing our healthcare system will fix Medicare, and strengthening Social Security and making it improved and better so that we have a prosperous, thriving middle class of all ages will ensure that is taken care of. I'm old enough to remember back in 2000 when President Clinton was giving his State of the Union address, and he said that we'd be debt-free by 2008. Unfortunately, we all lived through the Bush years, and we don't need to go through that again. But having a robust economy, having a vibrant middle class is how we use our debt smartly.
Well, I would say you're definitely on the right track. And I work with a group that really tries to get the knowledge out there of how our federal monetary system works and everything. And kind of one of the things we're doing is we're trying to find like politicians, especially in Congress, because you guys are the ones, behind the economic levers of power. And we're giving them like a challenge and saying, hey, if we provide you with a free copy of Stephanie Kelton's new book, The Deficit Myth, would you be willing to maybe read it and say a little something about it, something like that. And we're just trying to get the word out there and, trying to get our people on board and, get everybody kind of on the same page.
One of the things that I studied actually when I was younger, because I was looking into the policies of Social Security, speaking of the debt, is there were a couple of things that happened during the 1980s that really exacerbated the inequality in this country. One of them was changing the way corporate taxes work so that executive compensation was treated, that incentivized companies to have these crazy compensation and wealth packages for executives and discourage them from paying their workers well. That is something that they came really close to repealing during the Clinton administration, and just every lobbyist from here to the moon fought it. The second piece was the way that they treated payroll taxes. So they gave this massive tax cut to wealthy people, which ballooned the deficit. And then they raised payroll taxes on working folks. And what that did is make more regressive our tax system. And essentially what is happening is we pay so much interest in the debt every year. That interest goes to investors. Like I said, some are pensions, some are high paid investors. That interest is paid for by middle class taxes. And it was a giant shift of wealth that, because it's so wonky, often goes under the radar, but really needs to be addressed, because it is a pillar in how the middle class just got squeezed, and particularly on the tax front. Just in the recent 2017 tax bill, 160,000+ families in Wisconsin saw their taxes go up.
Great. We got a number of questions, but I'm going to stick with the economy and perhaps come back to some other topics. But one I think it was Janet who asked, what about federal job creation as a way to strengthen the economy? I mean, with the COVID crisis, one has to wonder if something drastic like that's got to happen.
During this level of economic depression, we need, like, the government has to be that stronger safety net. My grandfather worked for the WPA back in the 1930s, and he helped work on parks here in Wisconsin and did some other projects. And it was devastating, but that was a way that they could ensure that not just that people were getting money during that terrible time, but that they were being encouraged, they were building their skills. And what I'd like to see is a way to keep people, particularly folks, I mean, I've worked in retail. I have so many people that I've known in my life who have been devastated by this recession. And getting folks retrained and getting them either through an education program or through a job program that helps them build skills so that as the economy comes out of the pandemic, they'll be ready for that workforce. They'll be making more money. I've talked to so many folks. They had a job, and they were getting the pandemic unemployment assistance. Now that's not only running out, but often they're going to jobs that have lower wages or less hours than what they had beforehand. So we really need to be proactive in this moment to ensure that people come through stronger than they were before.
Alicia asks, is it okay that police have unions and teachers not have them? But I understand most teachers around here have unions, right? I assume you're supportive of unions. And so I would ask you what can be done to help strengthen unions.
Good question. As a former card carrying member of the UFCW, we can do a lot of things to help unions. Going back to like all the things that led to where we are today economically, the decline of unions in the country is a big piece of that. And we haven't had a real strong union legislation basically since World War II. Taft-Hartley started up the right to work movement in this country, and it has been a race to the bottom slowly ever since. I think we need a national standard and make it easy for folks to join a union. Empower unions, because unions train people. They give people the skills they need. So they actually help employers get better workers. And make certain that unions have a seat at the table in all these conversations, whether it's a seat at the table within big companies or a seat at the table when the government is negotiating things like huge trade deals. I was actually critical of the Obama administration because TPP really kind of left labor out in the dark on a lot of the things they were negotiating. And I don't think it's the right approach to things. So there's a lot of fixes we can do, and we can empower people and empower workers. I was working for a company, and their CEO had a negotiator for his compensation package. And the company, as part of his compensation package, reimbursed him for the cost of the negotiator. And when he said that, I said, this is why people need unions, because what they don't understand is that the big compensations that are going to these executives don't just happen because the executives are so cool. They're happening because they pay people and they have people representing that. So every worker should have that level of representation.
Okay, I'm going to switch gears here. And Jim raised this question. What do you think we should do to fix our immigration system? There's a tangled knot of problems.
That is a problem. I wrote my senior capstone paper on immigration reform back in 2005. I specifically was referring to, because a lot of people were talking about terrorism. So I dug through the 9/11 report, but I end up opening a can of worms on our immigration system, and it needs to be reformed. It can be reformed. Obama was so close to getting it done, and it was the far right caucus in the House that killed it. Let's break it apart with what needs to be done most urgently. One, we need to stop having kids in cages immediately. Two, DACA. The Supreme Court saved the DACA folks, but they've left the window open for the Trump administration to end DACA. And that essentially, the people on the court that want to allow the executive to do that have a bit, because there's executive discretion on that. It's basically a prosecutorial discretion issue. So what needs to happen is we need a legislative fix. I support the DREAM Act. They should pass it right away as soon as hopefully President Biden takes over. Let's get the DREAM Act fixed. These folks serve in our military. They've lived in this country for their entire lives. They don't deserve the sort of uncertainty and second-class citizen status that they have. The third piece is the overall immigration reform. We have done so much, and Democrats they did a good faith, hard stance on things like border security, on immigration restrictions. So, many Democrats voted for George Bush's border fence. They voted for expanding the border fence, expanding border patrol during the Obama administration. And we've realized that it's like Lucy in the football. It doesn't matter if the Democrats propose $1 trillion for border security. If we are going to enfranchise those folks that have been here and are working here and part of society, the Republicans are going to say no. And they're going to use race-baiting language to do it. So we need to push for the humanitarian response to this. Border security is important. Reforming our bureaucracy is even more important. Let's remember that most of the illegal immigration doesn't happen because of people crossing the border in the desert. It happens because they have problems with the visa bureaucracy or the passport bureaucracy. They come here and they become illegal after they've come here legally. So if we improve the bureaucracy, we handle a lot. And then let's focus on providing a path to citizenship for the folks that are here. And let's really tell the truth about what that means. That is something that brought conservatives and Democrats together not that long ago. And I think, hopefully, and I don't want to be too pie in the sky idealistic about it, but if we have this real defeat against not just Trump, but Trumpism, that will open up the opportunity to have real reform on these issues, because the Republicans today make Ronald Reagan look like a bleeding heart of immigration.
Okay, people have, chatted a bunch of stuff up there, which I scanned, but I'm going to prioritize especially questions on other topics we have yet to cover. I would like to switch it a little bit and raise this one. You said that you're in favor of universal health care. Now, maybe I misunderstood him, but when we had your opponent here, he, as I understood, is also in favor of universal health care and specifically Medicare for all, which is kind of a broad slogan for one way to do it. Would you take that path, the sort of Medicare for all path? And if not, why not? And what's the alternative?
Yeah, if you said that that's something different than what has been said, just on WISI and on his website, because he was asked point blank and didn't respond. Yes, that needs to be the goal. We need, and it hasn't just been me. There are people that have worked in the health insurance industry. The CEO of a former healthcare company said having a single pathway for healthcare is the most efficient way of doing it. I think that should be our target. A lot of times people ask me, are you in favor of building on the Affordable Care Act or for Medicare for all? And I said, well, anything we do that improves healthcare is going to be building on the Affordable Care Act. But what is our target? What is our goal? I like the idea of a Medicare for all who want it that focuses on reforming the back end, the billing system, but essentially allows people to get supplemental private insurance that keeps the competition, doesn't have a nationalized monopoly. For three reasons. One, I'm just against monopolies in general. Two, I just couldn't imagine what we'd be in if, with Donald Trump president and having the sole control over everyone's health insurance. Three, and this is important, if we reform the market by the reason the health insurance market exists today is because of all the inefficiencies in the market. If we establish a national Medicare system that anyone can sign up for, then the private market will adjust to the new marketplace and will actually encourage more innovation and better ways of doing provider care. The one thing I also like to note is, if you go to the doctor and you're on Medicare right now, that doctor is probably paid by a private insurance company. So just in the pure mechanics of rolling out a policy, that is the best pathway forward.
Okay, if people want to raise specific questions, I encourage you to do so. You know, especially on I want to prioritize topics that we haven't covered. I don't want to carry this on too much longer, but so do people have topics or questions specifically that that they want to raise? Like I said, that we haven't touched upon so far. I think we've spanned a wide range of topics, and let's see. What about Jim asked, what about relations with Europe? I can imagine a number of us are concerned about that right now.
I know I have a good friend of mine is living in Amsterdam right now, and it's we have a lot of relationship rebuilding to do in the next few years. Hopefully, like I said, with the President Biden. I write a quarterly global analysis, both geopolitical and economic, that gets distributed to companies, just my expertise. And my focus is on Europe. We have a couple things. One, thinking about what's going on in Italy and Spain, some of their economic problems, some of their political problems, and the dangers of kind of a European version of Trumpism that's a little bit scarier than what it is here. And even in Germany, they're seeing a rise of far-right groups that I think is dangerous. Coming through this pandemic and having real leadership on the pandemic is going to help us restore that relationship. My worry is that they are so much better off that we're going to fall behind and cede for the first time since World War II, a large portion of influence in the world to our European allies, which makes us economically less prosperous. I do have folks living in London that are friends of mine. They're going through Brexit. That is something that we need to be on top of and understand how best that we can continue our influence in marketplace for American goods in both the United Kingdom as well as in Europe. We, the United States, played a large role in settling peace between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and we need to ensure that we maintain, we're a good neighbor to those folks. And yeah, I mean, Germany has become such an influential power, and Angela Merkel has been standing up for democracy, and we don't know how much longer she's going to be in power. There's just a lot that's going to need to be done on that front. The threat of Putin is real. His influence, the influence he has over energy in the European market, the way he has tried to undermine democracies, not just in the United States, but also in Western Europe, is troubling. We need to be on top of it. We need to be going against corruption. A lot of corrupt, particularly in Eastern Europe, either governments or people that are influential hire very influential DC lobbying firms to protect themselves and buy that influence. And I think that we need to be standing up and make sure that we have a full-fronted faced foreign policy.
Let's see, Janet asks, what about foreign leaders' attitudes toward our prayers? How does that affect our position and influence in the world?
I mean, that question almost could, the answer is pretty obvious. I mean, people don't like Donald Trump. And he has not helped our standing in the world. I will say this, and it gives me hope. It's not as, I should say it's not as bad. It's different than it was during the Bush administration. Fortunately, we are not at a war. We don't have things like the black sites or, the shady way in which, the United States was going to pay off folks for prisoners or to, get involved in the drug trade. There's just a lot of things that were going on during the Bush administration that really, really turned us off to the world. There's actually a lot of immigration things that happened during the Bush administration that often we don't talk about anymore. But when President Obama came in, he had a lot to fix as well, and President Biden was with him, or Vice President Biden was with him. So now it's largely like its reputation, it's standing up for American values at home that impacts how we are viewed abroad. It's about the credibility that we have when we talk to other countries. And particularly when we're going up and we're going to have to stand, you know, China is extending its reach around the world with its Belt and Road Initiative. And if we want to restore our place as the best competitor, we need those countries to have faith in us and what we stand for and what we believe in.
Great. Maggie asks a question related to the environment. Do you support carbon fee and dividend?
So I'd like to know more details about what if there's a specific program, if it's like cap and trade or if it's something else that she's talking about. I've been on the record publicly talking about how we need to set a target of going carbon zero by 2050. And I think actually sooner than that on things like electricity generation and transportation. So we do that by how we have the marketplace for carbon, and it can provide an innovation incentive. So if you look at the best example of that for me is how we tackled smog in the late 70s and early 80s, where we were able to incentivize the innovation that brought smog levels down, nitrous oxide down. And I think that, so the 2050 date has to do with, so if you look at the different levels, it's not just that we're not producing carbon, but that we reach the levels that we needed to be at, according to what the climatologist said like 10 years ago. When I have spoken about this and break it up, 25% of our electricity is carbon-based, or yes, carbon-based. Or no, sorry, 25% of emissions is electricity. I think we can set a very aggressive target on going carbon zero on electricity, and that gets us 25%. The next about 17% is going to be transportation, and 6% of that can go by passenger cars, but we have to tackle aviation and shipping. The next big piece is agriculture, and I've actually talked a lot about this, both using methane from manure to convert to clean hydrogen fuel, as well as innovation in feed that reduces methane emissions from cows' burps. There's been a huge amount of technology in this field, and that gets us a huge chunk. If you took all the livestock in the world as a carbon emitter together, it would be the third largest carbon emitter behind the United States and China. So tackling and having sustainable agriculture gets us there. And the next piece is manufacturing, and that is the toughest piece of going carbon neutral in manufacturing. The thing is, if we're very aggressive on those first three things, we can kind of beat the clock and provide the innovation that'll lead us to manufacturing. You know, if tomorrow, beginning tomorrow, every electric car in the United States was electric, it would still take years because people just don't buy cars that often. The cars last longer. So we need to provide incentives for conversion that'll help us get there.
Excuse me, Josh, I didn't quite hear your answer to the specific question. Maybe I missed something. I mean, as I understand the carbon fee, that means it's kind of, I mean, they don't like to use the word tax, but essentially that's what it is. And the idea is you put the fee for the production of carbon, and then you put that money back in the way of a dividend. You put that back into the economy, giving it back to, you know, to everybody. So we all benefit. That may not be the best description of it, but that's my understanding.
Yeah. If it's similar to what
that's not the same as
talking about, he was campaigning, then yeah, that's then I agree with that.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, I think I'd just like to tackle maybe one more question and then wrap it up. This has been great, but going for more than an hour on Zoom is really pushing it. All right. Janet asks, what about the lack of or wrongly directed national and sometimes state leadership about COVID?
I mean, it is such a failure of leadership. It is heartbreaking for all the folks that look up to people that are, you know, members of the party. You know, I talked to a woman just over a week ago. She voted for Donald Trump, and a friend of hers, a family member of hers, got COVID, and it was like, you know, I couldn't think of a better explanation of like some sort of like just the blinders were lifted off, and she was just like, I just don't understand. Like, why, like, what is the purpose of covering it up? Why not just tell us what to do and lead by example? I mean, this is a woman who voted for Donald Trump. And she said, then she started going into like, well, why doesn't he release his taxes? And I'm like, where have you been? But yeah, we need from the top, everyone who's in a position of leadership, whether they are running for office, whether they're in office, to be leading by example, because it is costing people's lives unnecessarily. COVID is a tragedy. COVID is going to be with us for a while. And it's not just going to go away, but we can manage it with the right, responsible ways of doing it. And if the president and the vice president, Republican members of Congress, put petty partisanship aside and advocated for safety, then we would be a healthier country. And it is heartbreaking to see that level of partisanship just corrupt the system. You know, I hope that as a member of Congress to be a leader for both Republicans, Democrats, Independents in this district. And that's what we need. At the state level, I mean, the governor just is so hand-tied to do anything. And he's trying to push and trying to figure out ways that he can encourage the right behavior that needs to be done, because we need to be doing that. So, I mean, I've been wearing a mask. I encourage other people to wear masks. And I think eventually like reality takes hold, and hopefully that, unfortunately it's come to this, but if it continues this fight that's continuing, people are going to realize, okay, like that wasn't the truth. Like you weren't telling me the truth.
Okay, well, I think we'll call it quits there. I want to thank Josh for coming and engaging and giving us such in-depth answers to our many questions. And at this point, I'd say give him a big hand. We'll just have to imagine, we're all clapping.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Josh.
I'm gonna
All
put
right,
my,
there's a couple digital hands up there.
I'm gonna put my my email address for me directly in the chat. So if anyone has any follow-up questions, please feel free to email me, Josh at Pade for Congress.
Yeah, how to help you in times of, in times of COVID. That's going to be the challenge. We're going to figure out new ways of being active and organized and all that stuff. Those who want to get involved in campaigns.
Yep, we've got a number of organizers now. We're text banking and phone banking, and because we're in GOTV right now because a lot of people are voting absentee. So encouraging, if you haven't voted, I would appreciate your vote for me, and encouraging, letting other people know how they can vote safely, how they can vote by mail, and they should vote for Josh Pade.
Yeah, everyone should get your absentee ballot. That's what I advise. Do it now. Okay, well, we hope to actually maybe see you guys in person, if assuming we do our picnic next August. We'll stay tuned and we'll let you know if we get that together the second Wednesday of August. Something will happen, either the picnic or another Zoom. And I want everyone to stay cool if you can, and take care. Thanks for attending, folks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.